the Marathon County Extension Education Economics Development Committee agenda. Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Number 3, public comment. We do not have any public comment, or do we? No. Okay, thank you. Number 4, approve of the November 2nd, 2023 Extension Education Economics Development Committee meetings. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Rosenberg, second by Supervisor Bulk. All those in favor say aye. Aye. No, say no. Motion carried. Number 5, policy issue discussion and potential committee determination. None. Number 6, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. 6A, Marathon County's role in providing affordable housing. A1, 2023 resolution. Now, this resolution was drawn up with me being involved with Ann Lemmer, who is here today. Everybody looked at the resolution. Mr. Baker, I do believe you had some amendments to the resolution.
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
Potential amendments.
Potential, okay, yep,
Proposed or potential.
okay. Everybody looked at the resolution. Does anybody have any potential amendments or discussion on the resolution? Supervisor Lemmer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could address actually Supervisor Baker, I just want to say thank you for your input. I think most of it is very agreeable to me. I do have some questions. If I could take them one by one, is that okay?
That's fine.
All right. So Supervisor Baker, it looks like some of the changes you made have to do with taking out the 30% income on housing, and then any statements in the original third whereas related to homeless. Can you talk about that a little bit, please?
Sure.
Supervisor Baker?
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we
Can you hear me okay? I'm having some okay. So the 30%, that's like a national standard, and I'm not strongly against that. If we want to put that back in, that's fine. But I just thought that that doesn't necessarily apply to Marathon County's situation. But I'm not, like I say, I'm not strongly against that. The homeless, I took out, and I asked Administrator Leonard and Corp Counsel to provide some background on whether there is a mandate or other statutes relating to the county's interaction with homeless people. So they can weigh in on that, but my interpretation is that there's not anything that basically directs the county to have a like affordable housing program for homeless people. There are many services that have to do with mental health and for child protective services, that type of thing that did apply. I'm concerned that our focus is basically workforce development and providing housing for workforce, and I think that the putting a focus on homeless is an expansion of the county's responsibilities. So that's kind of why I wanted to take it out. That's helpful.
Certainly, I think the 30%, I've talked to a couple of bankers, and obviously when you lend for housing, there are guidelines that are maybe best practice. So that what was explained to me is when somebody goes in for a mortgage, that's sort of a level that they want. Obviously, there's other factors with income and whatnot. No, I'm not against it not being there. I was just more curious why it was there. Regarding the homeless, I think the county does already have some support with homeless. Not that it needs to be in there. I just was more wondering why it was out. You also took out, and then now therefore be it resolved, the very first one, which had to do with identifying current initiatives. I just wondered if you could talk about that too.
Sure, and I'm not against the objectives in those. I think those are tasks and objectives for the county board. That it'd be better that we should do that and identify those, not staff to do that. That seems like more of a policy role. Again, that's a topic for discussion. If the committee feels otherwise, that's fine. But if we want to try to do that and for a month or two and then add on to the resolution, I'm saying is we don't want to pass the resolution today. We want to try to identify those and more put that in the resolution. I just thought that it was maybe not appropriate to have the staff do that as opposed to us as a county board do that.
Yeah, certainly. I think the goal with that one was just the county is already involved in certain housing initiatives. I personally know of a few, and it was more of getting a more exhaustive look. And I think the administrator probably has that view. And so by staff, I probably should have said the administrator. But anyway, I appreciate your work on this. I am open to those changes as they are. So thank you again for your work.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee or Supervisor Rosenberg?
Yeah, and I don't know how this relates to it, but I was reading in the, NC National County News, sort of an interesting program, and I think it's in Waco County, North Carolina. And what they did was they had a fund because landlords are reluctant to rent to people with bad records or like criminal records or homeless, that kind of thing. And what the county did there, and I'm not suggesting we do this because it takes much more research than I've ever done, but they set up a fund, and they set up a fund to pay back rents, and they set up a fund to pay damages, that kind of thing, and that encouraged landlords to be more open to people renting. And if I remember the article right, they're hardly getting any claims to that fund, which I found sort of interesting, but just something to think about.
Thank you. Administrator Leonard, do you have any thoughts on what the resolution says as it's in the packet or as is what Supervisor Baker is?
Nope, I don't have any perspective. I think it's a policy question for the board, really, what you want in terms of staff involvement. Excuse me, just clarification though, I think right now you don't have any one of the resolutions, before you for adoption. But no, I have happy to answer any questions about any of the specifics, but right now I don't have an opinion to offer.
Towards the last, where it says, now therefore be it, resolved, number one, their Marathon County staff shall identify current initials to addressing the housing. Is that staff or is that the administrator that does that?
Well, by operation of state statute, I am your sole employee, so regardless of whether you direct me to do it, I'm most likely going to have to delegate a fair amount of that work. But as Supervisor Baker laid out, excuse me, if that's an exercise that the board would feel more comfortable being involved in the identification process and see those opportunities, I'm happy to, as always, bring information that I'm aware of to the board. And that, as always, the board would, through things like my annual work plan, kind of break out my time and prioritize projects to move forward.
So I don't have, well, Supervisor or Baker's resolution in front of me right now, but,
It's the one that.
oh, it's up here, okay. Okay. Oh, way down here, okay. There. So, you know, there where it says Marathon County staff shall identify, is that comfortable with everybody? Okay,
Yeah, I also, Chair Seefeld.
yeah, go ahead, Supervisor Baker.
So in addition to the ones that, to the changes that Supervisor Lemmer mentioned, I did modify what I renumbered as 1 and 2. So in the original language, it was to develop a plan to, for housing on these properties. I changed that to promote the development of housing on these high potential properties. Administrator Leonard had mentioned that in our previous meeting. And then on number 2, instead of making it, looking at like a tax deed restriction, I changed that to be in order to enhance the availability of affordable housing stock. So I did make those 2 changes as well that I just wanted to point out.
Yep.
So that, you know, people were transparency and full disclosure, basically.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Supervisor Baker. So, any other questions from the committee? Are we comfortable with what Supervisor Baker has presented as amended to the resolution? Any thoughts? Okay. So we could forward this to the county board?
Yes, you'd need a motion.
Yep, yeah.
Oh, there we go. You would need a motion to forward the resolution as authored by Supervisor Baker to the full board for consideration, because as I said before, you don't have
Right.
a formal motion on the floor at this point.
Okay, thank you.
I'd make the motion to forward that.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Rosenberg, second by Supervisor Book. All those in favor of the resolution proposed amendment to forward it to the county board, say aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
No, say no. Motion carried. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Supervisor Baker and Supervisor Lemmer. My
Yeah, I would
names
make
are-
one comment that
Go ahead, Supervisor Baker.
I wouldn't say that I authored it. I would say that you and Supervisor
Right.
Lemmer authored, and I just
Right.
made a few amendments.
Yep.
So.
Okay. Okay. Yep. We'll straighten that out. Thank you. I got to get back to the agenda here. Okay, 6B, consideration of initial resolution of digester project.
I can provide some
Administrator.
context as to where we are, and hope to field some additional questions. But this is a follow-up to the full county board presentation you had from the entity that is seeking that initial resolution authorizing the county to serve as a conduit issuer for purposes of an industrial revenue bond for construction of a manure digester in the Village of Maine. There was that educational presentation at the full board, and I understand there will be conversations at not only this committee, but there was a meeting of the Environmental Resources Committee earlier this week where they took up the same issue as characterized by Chair Longenhan of that committee. They kept their focus primarily on the environmental aspects of that project and considered next steps. My recollection of what came out of that committee was that it is being forwarded to the full board for consideration that the county does adopt that initial resolution to serve as the conduit issuer. But of course, that doesn't preclude this committee from discussing it and offering comments as well, but that will be taken up by the full board. Following this committee discussing it as well, I understand it's going to be on the HR Finance and Property Committee for its consideration. Just to kind of recap the discussion that was had at Environmental Resources, and this is my perspective, so it's certainly not meant to be anything other than that, but there was discussion about the benefits of serving as the as the conduit issuer, and I characterized the choices before the committee as I think there are three, and before the full board, I think there are three. One is to serve as the conduit issuer as provided by statute. Two is to authorize the entity to go to the Public Finance Authority, or PFA, to secure financing. And third is to take action to not support the issuance of financing through the PFA. The county, for financing to be provided through the Public Finance Authority, the county needs to provide its assent. And of course, that's an option. You could not do that. So those were the three choices I kind of laid out that I think are before the board. Certainly open to feedback if there are others, but then the committee members had a discussion about what they thought as potential benefits. They got information from the Wisconsin DNR. The DNR had a CAFO, a confined animal feeding operation expert on the meeting, and provided an overview of that permitting process through the DNR. They also had a DNR representative that handles high capacity wells attend that meeting to provide insight on that process. And finally, they had someone from the DNR that is involved in the design or spec review process for manure digesters, in addition to county staff also providing some information relative to the county's animal waste ordinance and the fact that the Village of Maine, as an incorporated area, is not covered by that ordinance at this time because they have not adopted their own ordinance and have not adopted the county's. So that was all the discussion that was had there. And again, this is my characterization, but the rationale, at least one of the rationales that was articulated by the committee as to move forward with consideration for serving as the conduit issuer, is that it allows for the county to engage in negotiation with the entity to secure some potential requirements in the execution of that digester project that you wouldn't otherwise be able to secure if private financing was used or if the entity went to the PFA. But if anyone else attended the meeting and has a different perspective, certainly I would defer to that.
Okay. Any questions for Administrator Leonard from the committee? If the county board does accept this, then it's basically just bonding them, or is it, how does that work, as far as the way it goes?
And Corporation Counsel just stepped out for a court hearing, so I'm going to do my best here, acknowledging that I'm not a conduit financing expert, but my understanding, the initial question before the board is whether to adopt the initial resolution, which there's a draft in your packet.
Okay.
that initial resolution was described by the entity as serving as a stake in the ground. And from their perspective, they shared that that initial resolution does not bind the county to actually serve as the conduit issuer, at a later date. But what it allows is it allows for the entity then to expend money in connection with the project, and should a final authorization, a final resolution be adopted by the county board to serve as the conduit issuer, they could seek reimbursement for the expenditures between that initial resolution adoption and the final resolution adoption. So this initial resolution adoption that's going to be considered by the board next week, if you adopt it, if you say, yes, we are adopting the initial resolution to serve as a conduit issuer, you are not mandated to actually do so at a later date. But it does serve as that stake in the ground, I think is the phrase they used. And again, that's my understanding. I fully acknowledge I am not a industrial revenue bond conduit issue expert.
Thank you. Thank you, Administrator Leonard. I see this as would probably be fine maybe to, go through with this, but is it down the road? If another CAPO wants to, is that entity going to come to us again? That's a possibility, I would think, isn't it?
People are looking at me, so I'll chime
Yeah.
in. I think it's certainly likely. In fact, you've already had another entity interested. It's a different entity than the one that has approached you and presented already, has reached out and indicated that they too are interested in having the county serve as a conduit issuer under that same statute for a very similar project in terms of it is a manure digester. It's a different type of digester layout as far as I understand. And again, this is my thought as to why that's happening. The cost of capital for these projects, we had historic low interest rates for a number of years, and the gap between what private entities were able to secure in terms of financing costs, and the gap between that and what public financing through PFA or through conduit issuers, that gap was relatively small. Now with the increased cost of capital, that gap is increased. So I do think, to your underlying premise, Chair Seefeld, it is reasonably likely to assume that we as the county or any other municipality is more likely to get these requests in the future. It was my understanding is that Langlade County adopted an initial resolution for a manure digester project relatively recently. I'm going to confer with my colleagues to verify that, but that was shared with me. And I do believe the entity that was pursuing the project in Langlade County is the same entity that is overseeing the project, not the one that presented to you recently, but the one that contacted my office following that presentation.
Thank you, Administrator Leonard. Any other questions from the committee or anybody that's on WebEx? Okay, moving on. Do we,
I'd make a motion that's what I want to do, right?
Well, I don't know that I can answer that question. That's what you want to do.
is that,
But I can say that the county board is going to be taking this up because it was adopted by another standing committee, regardless of any action taken by this committee. That said, it certainly is within the purview of this committee to make a motion evincing your support or
okay,
lack of support, or have discussion about what you think. Should the county adopt an initial resolution, what are some areas of concern that you'd like addressed in the negotiation process to follow? And if you look in your packet, I believe it's on page 7, the last line of the correspondence from Attorney Templin with Hush Blackwell regarding this process, it reads, the initial resolution is not a commitment to issue bonds, but merely evidences the county's official intent to issue bonds pending satisfactory negotiation of terms, or of the terms, excuse me. So, there's that stake in the ground, but then that negotiation process would follow, whereby the county would have the opportunity to attempt through that negotiation process to secure certain concessions from the entity, whether those be financial in nature or otherwise. I did send an email to the county board and then an email correcting my math after conferring with Attorney Templin, laying out what I believe to be the financing costs associated with utilizing the Public Finance Authority. So that's something you could talk about, is what you would essentially charge as a fee, both initially, upfront, and then on an annual basis, or other things like those that were discussed at Environmental Resources that would attempt to prevent or mitigate risks that you saw with the project.
Okay, thank you. So we need a motion from the floor or the committee.
I'll make the motion to accept this initial resolution as presented.
Motion made by
I second.
Supervisor Rosenberg and second by Supervisor Bushman. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, everyone. Now, moving on. Sorry about that. Number 7, educational presentation and committee discussion. 7A, McDevco monthly report. Kim?
Well, thank you. So just want to give you an overview of the 3 pillars we continue to stay focused on at McDevco. The first being financing. So you can see on your report, we administer gap financing on behalf of Marathon County and the city of Wausau. And we've had a really great year with our gap financing as well as our microloan programs that we've been administering in the city of Wausau. We also administer the POUTS revolving loan fund, so private on-site wastewater treatment system revolving loan fund in partnership with Marathon County. That program began in October. We've funded approximately $34,000 dispersed, I should say, already this year, and we're continuing to process applications even through the winter so that folks are ready to go in spring when the ground thaws. So this has been a very fun and rewarding program for myself and the staff to administer. And we've been working with CPZ on some of the letters that have been sent out to make sure we're connecting with folks so they know this resource is available. McDevco did administer COVID-19 grants. You can see what we've administered on behalf of Marathon County. That program has since ceased. Collectively, between the Marathon County grants, City of Wausau, and other private funds, we dispersed approximately $700,000 to businesses throughout Marathon County in total that were impacted by the pandemic. Relating to education, I just want to highlight our 2 most recent programs. So, it would have been Tuesday, we just wrapped up our 12-week Gear Certificate program. We had 9 participants and 9 graduates. They ended by presenting the lean canvas of their business, and we're continuing follow-up programming due to the engagement from this group. Typically, we see 30% that actually launch their business immediately after the class. That's not to say the other 70% don't. We continue mentoring and connecting them with our mentor group. And they may just need to create a better funnel or revenue stream or identify ways to make their business more sustainable long-term. That creates that delay post-class, but we continue working with them. And then in November, we had a women's conference. It was an Inside Out Leadership Summit. It was geared towards women entrepreneurs or female executives within the business world in Marathon County. So we had a really great participation and attendance in that program. McDevco continues to convene the municipalities. On Tuesday, we held a municipality meeting. We had about 19 attendees. That's been our number consistently each time, and we're continuing to bring in partners such as NCW, RPC, WEDC, Synergy, so that we can all stay aligned and talk about issues and solutions impacting our backyards. EEC management, McDevco took over managing the business incubator on 72nd Avenue. It was about 59% full when we took over. We're about 88% full with manufacturing is full, with a handful of offices left to lease. And we worked with the EEC board on adopting a tenant tenure policy. So we'll be working with tenants as they outgrow our space to help them get into your communities to continue to run their businesses. I do want to point out one of the programs that we have started hosting each year is a workshop specifically for EEC tenants where we're educating them on if you've outgrown the space, what financing is available, how do you find a site that's appropriate for you. So talking about site selection and how we work with municipalities throughout Marathon County to provide them with specifications that these business owners need so we can successfully place them within our community. And then third, bringing in a commercial lender to talk about SBA and other financing available and what that might look like in partnership with McDevco's financing, as well as representatives from municipalities to talk about if they have any rehab programs available or low interest programs to help with spaces that they might be occupying that have been vacant. Would this be a good time for me, Lance, to talk about? Okay, so, we've been working with the county also. We administer the Marathon County Revolving Loan Fund Agreement, which is coming up for expiration. And McDevco has had great success with its revolving loan fund with the city of Wausau and how we've been able to modernize that. And we'd like to translate that to what we're able to do within Marathon County. So within Wausau, we can currently gap lend up to 40% of a total project. And we have microloan funds available. So what that means is if somebody's working with a bank, a bank calls and says, hey, we can fund up to 70% of this project. What can McDevco assist with? Giving us more latitude to fund a higher percentage of a project, very similar to what's already being done with SBA. With a benefit from McDevco being our interest rates are fixed. So Lance talked about the cost of capital being high, our interest rates being fixed for those gap loans. And then we've been able to successfully administer micro business grants where we're not working with a primary lender, but we're serving business owners that maybe haven't ever sought traditional financing before, and we offer a low interest loan fund that has flexible uses for them so they can continue to buy inventory or some of those other soft cost items that aren't traditionally financed. So we're working on modifying what does the Marathon County Revolving Loan Fund Agreement look like compared to what McDevco is doing within the city of Wausau, and how can we expand and bring some of those amenities to business owners within our community outside of the Wausau zip code to help benefit those communities. As well as having conversations about what a housing component may look like as we look to evolve how McDevco is serving your communities. Anything you'd add?
Sure. So just as a little background, like Kim said, the Marathon County Revolving Loan Fund is something that's been in existence for a while. In fact, I pulled up the resolution today. It was adopted in February of 2018. And what that resolution says, for a little bit of historical context, Marathon County was approached at that time by a local foundation that offered to provide $1 million in funding to McDevco if Marathon County would provide another $1 million to match it for purposes of creating the revolving loan fund. Again, hoping to provide financing through gap financing for new and expanding businesses. So that resolution essentially amended the budget to provide for those funds. And then why it's important to me now in this role is that it directed the administrator to negotiate a memorandum of understanding to kind of lay out how McDevco is going to operate that fund. So that took place in 2018. My predecessor executed that agreement. And as Kim said, it is up for renewal. So we've had a number of conversations, and this is really just an update for the committee, but we're going to provide a similar update at HR Finance. But we are making a couple of changes, and I think they really do strengthen that agreement. And as Kim said, one of them is on the idea of modifying that gap percentage from 20% to 40%, kind of expanding McDevco's ability to impact those businesses. The other is that micro loan fund that Kim referenced for individuals and businesses, I should say for businesses that are seeking financing without having to partner with a financial institution, a bank. And the third one that was important from my perspective is there was the potential under the previous agreement for Marathon County representatives to serve on the McDevco Loan Committee, but it was not a requirement. So from my perspective, I thought it was important to ensure that on both the revolving loan fund and this new micro loan fund, that Marathon County board members that were appointed to McDevco through your annual appointment process, that there be at least one representative on both from the Marathon County Board. So those are the three big amendments that, in my mind, we're making to that agreement. The McDevco board has been discussing these amendments for some time and are in favor of those, but really just updating you. I thought that last one was really the most, operationally, all the things that relate to the gap financing and the microloan fund, those are great for businesses. But in terms of transparency and involvement to the Marathon County Board, I thought it was important to require that an appointee of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors serve on each of those loan committees to be informed and involved in the disbursement of the $1 million, the initial $1 million, and as those funds come back, that continued revolving loan fund.
And we did this similar process with the POUTs. So in our approval process, it was really important to the county and McDevco to make sure that McDevco was representing, and bringing these loans to committee, but that there was someone on the approval committee from the county that has direct impact with how those funds are dispersed. So very important to us, and that's been very successful with POUTs. So, Administrator Leonard and I thought it would be great to just continue that process through.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Any questions for Kim or Administrator Leonard? Thank you again. Moving on to 7B, Library Report. Leah.
Oh, thank you, Chair Seefeld. I heard we're getting new mics in this room. That's exciting. Right. Thank you all. You should have my report in your packet. And a couple of nice highlights from the past month are listed there. First, we have our new self-checkout kiosks. We've had self-checkout kiosks for about 12 years. We purchased those before my time, probably 12 years ago or so. Around the same time, we purchased a sorter, which also recently died and was replaced. So same kind of situation here. It was beyond its life. We thank them for their service, and now we have brand new bright ones. It looks a little bit like Reno with the light up self-checkout kiosks. We're getting used to that and might be able to soften that a bit. But anyhow, they're very, very useful and they're helpful. And the one good thing about the lights is that if a patron is having an issue doing their own self-checkout, it lights up red, and so one of our employees will be able to easily notice and come to their aid, sometimes before they even realize there's an issue. So that's something nice. Last month's programming, a couple of highlights from that that I put in the report is the Books on the Bus program. We work with the bus area, and they come around and they go and we read stories on the bus, and it's a very exciting program for everybody. We have lots of participation there. And another program that's really big out at the branches right now is our escape rooms. Don't worry, we're not taking cracked business. They're very simple. They're, let's say, a starter taste of an escape room. They're more for young people and families, but they've been hugely successful. If I have time, I can plug a couple of programs that we have upcoming. Right now, you're missing Read to a Therapy Dog at Rothschild Branch, but don't worry, we do have that program recurring where people come and they bring their children and they can read to a furry friend who's well behaved and certified as a therapy dog, and it just helps kids feel comfortable and get them into the habit of reading. We're also missing right now at Mosinee Crafts and Games Social Hour. We're really focusing on becoming a community hub. I mean, we're always have been a community hub, but I think finding these opportunities to interact with your community, with your family, with your friends, with your neighbors is something that we're just really trying to focus on, especially at our branch locations. So that's something that's going on. Of course, we always have different craft programs. This week at Stratford Branch, we're doing like a passive program where you can learn how to make homemade bows for any of your Christmas packages coming up. We also have story times for various age groups. All of our programming is available to view on mcpl.us. If you just click the events tab, it's in chronological order. You can also click by branch if you want to just look at events at a particular location. So that's available to everybody to check out and see what we have going on. Internally, we have a couple of updates. We're currently working through a strategic plan process. WILS, the Wisconsin Library Service, are our consultants on this program, and last week they hosted a staff SOAR. SOAR is kind of like a SWOT, but friendlier. It stands for Strengths, Opportunities, Aspirations, and Results. And so we got staff input. Right now, there's also currently community Q&A boards at all of our locations where our patrons can chime in on some important questions on the direction of the library. So that's things that we're all gathering the data right now, and then our consultants will aggregate that data and give us some focuses for the future. Also, last week we had the library staff development day, so we were closed last Friday. If you were trying to come to the library, that's our one day a year that we're closed just to gather. We had Rachel Arndt, who is a librarian. She is a consultant, and she's an adjunct professor at UW Milwaukee. And she came and she led the day, also hosted by WVLS, our system. And we had a good opportunity to meet with our teams, to talk about, well-being, to talk about what we want for the future, to talk about good service. And it was a really nice day. Also because we did it in December, it was a bit of a holiday party, and that was nice too, to sort of bond and get, our branch locations, sometimes they don't see each other all the time because they're spread out among our gigantic county. So it's nice to get everybody together, and we really, it was a valuable day. What else do we have going on? We have 2 library trustee terms ending. We have, me, along with our other administration team, our managers, have been participating in various NICE project work groups. NICE is an acronym, which stands for Northern Wisconsin ILS Consortium Exploration, and that is a mouthful. But what it means is the WVLS, the system that we currently are members of, and Northern Waters, an adjacent system, are looking at the prospect of combining. And it's a really complicated, long-term project. I think it was DPI that ultimately determined that we have like 16 systems in our state, and that's a lot. And so they're trying to work together to combine systems just to make them overall more sustainable. I think it might improve buying power too. Our ILS, which is our catalog, that software is fairly expensive. And so I think if you combine with other groups and you buy in sort of a bigger bulk way, you might be able to save money in that area. So right now I'm on the funding formula project of NICE, where we're just determining like the most feasible and fair funding formula between the 2 systems if we were to share an ILS. They're not yet at the place where they're talking about combining systems completely, where they would share staff, but this is sort of the first step. If we combine the ILS, then we start combining our policies and our standards, and then we move closer and closer into that combined effort. I'm also about to be starting to participate in the other NICE work group, which is governance, talk about how to make decisions, right? Marathon County Public Library is a really large library in our system. We're the resource library, and in WVLS, we have a sort of 2-prong weighted voting system, which works in our favor. We didn't always have that. Originally, it was 1-for-1 voting, and it's odd when we're 40% of the population out of 26 libraries. And so now we have a better balance of that. So talking about what that would look like were we to combine, how is that weighted still, I think, are important pieces. So it's a long-term project. There's lots and lots of work groups. If you've ever met a librarian, they really like to do some research and then talk about it and then do some more research and then talk about it some more. So we're doing lots of that. But hopefully the end result is going to be beneficial for not only WVLS member libraries in Marathon County, but also Northern Waters. That's all I have for you today. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions? Supervisor Rosenberg.
Who is the Northern Waters? I mean, what counties are those?
There are adjacent, I couldn't name all of the counties. If I had my sheet, if you go to WVLS, they have a map of all of the systems, and it's the one directly north. It's a fairly small system. I would say it's about
Direct to the east or to the west of where, because
North.
we go all the way up to the border, right?
Oh, you have it.
Looks like it's Douglas, Bayfield, Ashland. Is this correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Iron County, Vilas, Sawyer, Washburn, and Burnett. So the very northern part of the state.
A lot of small counties, population-wise.
Yeah. WVLS would represent about 65% of all population, and they would be like 30-some.
My other question is, and I don't know if it's appropriate to ask, so you can ignore me if you'd like, but you've got 2 board members for reappointment. Is the first of the year or whenever?
Yeah, so at the end of the year, 2 of our board member terms will expire. Both of them were filling the rest of a previous term from previous board members. I believe that Trustee Jacobson is unavailable for reappointment, but Trustee Rayom, I believe, is hoping to be reappointed.
Any thoughts or insights into that process? I mean,
Well, thank you for asking. Nobody asks me. Yeah, no,
more than I do. Just to help us
Yeah,
decide.
absolutely. I think speaking to Trustee Rayom, because he, I believe, is hoping to be reappointed. He's been on the board for about 1.5 years, like I said, filling in for a previous trustee the rest of their term. He's been very attentive. He goes to every meeting. He goes to county board meetings. He's called to inquire for information, and that's nice because it's a volunteer position. And so it's nice that people have been interactive. I mean, really, I'm very grateful for our board as a whole because it's been a challenging year for our trustees. And like I said, it is a volunteer position. And so I'm really grateful. But yeah, I mean, I think Trustee Rayom has been an exceptional advocate for the library. He seems invested. Yeah, I don't know if that's what you're asking, but
Thank you.
thank you.
Any other questions for Leah? Okay, thank you very much for that report. Very, very good. Moving on to UW, Jeremy.
All right, thank you, Chair Seefeld. So you have the educator's report in your packet. I'll just highlight a few things, maybe touch on a couple of things that are not directly in there, but related. So 4-H related, we're in what we call the enrollment period. So kids and families are signing up for membership in 4-H. As you may remember from last year, the programs continued to grow pretty strongly. Holly and the rest of the crew's goal for this year is to be the largest 4-H program in the state. And so they're doing lots of good work to recruit members. Part of what you see in the report is after-school programs. So that's one of their areas of focus this year is offering 4-H program in partnership with the school district in an after-school setting. We actually have an AmeriCorps member who's doing a bunch of that work. And then we're also in the midst of some long-term evaluation that's looking at the impact of 4-H on kids in Marathon County, but also across the state. And so we'll get to see the results of that evaluation data coming up a little bit, hopefully early in 2024. Agriculture, just to point out there that Heather is doing a ton of work to support dairy farmers in the county. And for that work, she was recently recognized by the Farm Bureau, the County Farm Bureau, with a Distinguished Service Award, which was, always nice to see other folks recognizing the work that's going on. Food-wise, the team is back to full with Michelle coming back from maternity leave. So they're kind of full bore into programs. Julia, who just started in her position in September, is in the process of getting established with schools. So that position is going to focus more on school-based education programming, nutrition programming again, coming up here soon. And then horticulture, Janelle wrapped up the therapeutic horticulture program, Gaining Grounds program, had a really good year participation-wise and impact-wise, and is in the winter programs primarily is doing general public programming for master gardeners, other people with gardening interests, lots of programs at the library. So you see a number of those identified. And then the last thing to point out is on page 37, which talks about the additional extension outreach programming. Just to highlight, those are all programs that are happening in Marathon County, but by other educators, whether those are educators in other counties that are providing programming here, because we don't have a educator like the Rent Smart program, or by state specialist or regional educators who are doing programming regionally. So those are kind of benefits to the county that were happening from other partners funding, which is kind of nice. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Any questions for Jeremy? Okay, thank you very much, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Moving on to UW Stevens Point Wausau report, and I do believe it's Miranda.
Yes, hi. Well, first I'll introduce myself since this is my first time being here. My name is Miranda Gentry Siegel, and I've been working on the Wausau campus for 11 years now. The two roles I'm currently serving, I am an academic advisor and have been for a long time. And with Dr. Azella Toms leaving her role as campus executive, I've stepped in as director of campus operations and will be serving in that role through the rest of this academic year until June. And just a couple of things I will highlight. We are so excited that we will have a new dining vendor starting. And I've really enjoyed working with them so far, and we'll be so happy to have them on campus starting in the spring semester. Our enrollment looks to be right on track with where it was around this time last year. We do have some targeted enrollment drives going on for both our traditional age students, and we have a new Wausau and Marshfield campus recruitment coordinator who's going to be coming on board later this month, who will be targeting more of the non-traditional student market in both the Wausau and Marshfield communities. So we expect enrollment to be going up from there. I think those are the major updates that I have, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Miranda? Okay, thank you very much. Very good. Moving on, number 8, next meeting time, date and time, announcements, and future agenda items. 8A, committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussion. If you would, please. 8B, next meeting time, January 4th, 2024 at 3 p.m. And I will take number 9 for adjournment.
I'd move to adjourn.
By Supervisor Rosenberg, second by Supervisor Book. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We are adjourned, everyone, and this is in record time. Thank you very much.